Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. We have the opportunity today to talk with the founder and CEO of a company that was recognized as one of Gartner's top 25 enterprise software startups. It's funny because when I discovered that I had the opportunity to interview this particular person here, I knew exactly who his company was because several of my clients use his software. And so I see his company almost every other time that we're jumping in on these conference calls. He was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as one of 12 founders changing the business back in 2020. He's been a Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneur and so forth. Got a whole stacked resume of accomplishments. But like all our high-powered guests, let's just jump right into it. So welcome to the show, Krish Ramineni.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to be here. I think this will be an awesome little session.
Sure. Now, your company name is Fireflies. Tell us just a little bit about Fireflies.
Yeah. So, Fireflies is an AI meeting assistant. It joins your video conferencing calls across Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and other video players. And it will transcribe everything word for word, take notes, generate summaries, and also put all of that information into the systems where you already work. So it really is your personal secretary, your AI secretary. That was the vision we started with. And today it's scaled up and it's being used across over 200,000 organizations. We did not believe in our wildest dreams that we would be able to scale the system to where it is today, but we're glad to be on that journey right now.
So, how did you scale?
So the way we started Fireflies was I had left Microsoft at the time. I was a product manager and I had a few weeks before starting grad school at Cambridge. And I went over to Boston, met one of my friends who I had worked on many projects with. He was graduating from MIT. And we just started working on a bunch of different products. So before the current version of Fireflies, there were probably five, six iterations of different things that we did, all in the conversational space, all in the AI space. But it was only after like 1 to 2 years of walking in the desert without having a map that we finally landed on this thing that really stuck with end users. And I think the epiphany for us was you want to build something that you yourself would want to use. I think that's the way to build a great product is if you yourself are a customer. There are some exceptions to the rules, but I think the best founders in the past have been able to build things that they care about and they want to use. And I just realized I had a lot of meetings and I spend so much of my time in meetings and taking notes, and I don't want to pull out a piece of paper and pen. And one day, as we were working on all these different projects, we said, what if I just had something that could just jot down all the things that I'm saying when I'm talking to investors, when I'm talking to customers, when I'm doing sales pitches, so I can go back and listen to that, read through that, and search through that. And we said, why not just make that the product and the company? And that was the aha moment. And we started testing it out with a couple hundred of our close colleagues and friends. And from there, Fireflies grew slowly but surely.
Awesome. One of the most disruptive technologies. I mean, I know AI really in theory was around 8 years ago, but it wasn't as actively practiced as it is today. Companies, we're at a point in time where the level or the speed of obsolescence is faster now than it's ever been. I mean, software companies are starting in the morning and they're going out of business by evening. It's really remarkable. So, talk to me about AI and the impact that it's made on your business right now.
So 2016 to 2019, we were working on a bunch of different technologies. The core premise was, how do I unlock knowledge buried inside conversations? All work starts with conversations. And we were building tools for email, for Slack, and for all these other tools. Then we realized, wait, meetings is the most unstructured form of data. It's the most valuable piece of data for an organization. Yet no one's capturing this or understanding it or making sense of this. And it was around 2019 that we doubled down on that initiative. We raised our seed round at that time at the end of 2019. We launched actually in January 2020, just a few weeks before the pandemic took over. And I guess part of that was it brought Fireflies to the center stage because everyone was looking for a tool like this. And I think it brought a lot of relevance to the platform. So obviously, you can't time everything, but that was just some fortune for us in terms of timing. But more importantly, all those years leading up to that launch, because when the PR and news agencies see, oh, Fireflies is an overnight success. It launched in 2020. It's grown like crazy. But no one realizes the years of trials and iterations that happened prior to that and all the failures that helped us learn how to build products, how to write code, how to scale the platform. And back then, AI, like you said, wasn't really well formed or polished. Even in 2020, you didn't have OpenAI or ChatGPT like technology. So we fought with a lot of the headwinds and skepticism that investors would have. One was there is no way you can make this affordable for all these people because AI is really expensive. There's no way that transcription is actually going to be accurate. Like you have all these different accents, there's a lot of noise. You can never do that. You got to have human beings, right? Like to do this. And we believed in the technology curve. We made improvements. We built the system in a way that said, look, we want to democratize AI. That's our long term mission that everyone should have an AI assistant. And we need to bring down the costs as much as possible. And over time, we've dramatically brought it down where today you can get a 1 year subscription with Fireflies for the same cost as it would be to transcribe 2 hours with a human. And that completely flipped the entire model on its head and made it affordable to the everyday person. And then likewise, OpenAI and all these LLMs made us believe, right? We had this pipeline dream in the past that the summaries are going to be good enough that you will feel like, wow, it's doing better than me. And people were very skeptical of that. I wasn't fully convinced like the technology would get there in a short period of time because the summaries we were generating back then were only pulling pieces of information out like little clips. But now Fireflies can paraphrase and write shorthand notes, create action items, create an outline with timestamps, all the things that a human would do with that level of accuracy. And we're blown away. And that aha moment for a lot of people in the last 15 months was wow, Fireflies can take notes as good as me, if not better, and consistently. Because I might be really attentive one meeting, but I might be falling asleep in another. But this gives me a level of consistency. So, yeah, ultimately, technology, timing will help, but you have to like continue to be persistent and you need to be stubborn about your long term vision and you need to be flexible about your short term journey to get there because it's always not going to be a straight line. There's going to be a lot of zigzags.
Makes a lot of sense. You said a couple of things that I just want to point out. One, when you were saying people believed that certain things weren't possible, as I recall, there was a discussion that the founder had with an investor, and there was a talk about him being crazy. And the investor turned around and said, "No, the problem is you're not being crazy enough." And it really got me thinking. I obsessed myself over studying, the differences between centimillionaires and billionaires and so forth. And at any given point in time, those who are the most successful have been told that they were crazy. And the crazier they were, and the crazier that other people felt they were, it just reaffirms their belief that they're going in the right direction. You probably have to think a little bit bolder and be a little more brazen with your concepts. And then you mentioned one other thing about the different challenges that were presented to you. That's the other thing. The challenge is so big enough that most people think it's impossible or it's scary. That opens up another opportunity. So be crazy, be really crazy, and do something that scares you.
At the end of the day, for every crazy idea that there is, there's probably 1,000 that don't work out. And so I think believing in something that is not what everyone believes in is important because if it was so obvious at the time we started, then there would have been 100 other companies trying to do the same thing. Because it was uncertain and there was a lot of risk, you have this blue ocean opportunity to go and do this. And the same thing can be said about other companies. Like the classic example is Amazon. And I heard a story that in 1907, Jeff Bezos went to the Harvard Business School to give a little pitch and present his ideas. And all the students at Harvard Business School were basically saying, this is not going to work. Now, you look back, those people that went to Harvard, well educated, right? I've been to like an Ivy League school, but I also realized that your degree doesn't really correlate to your actual knowledge of the world. And sometimes you're trained to think in a very cookie cutter fashion of what is only possible because your whole life you want to succeed, you can only take risks up to a certain level. So when I think about that story about how wrong those Harvard Business School students were about Jeff Bezos, that gets you to realize that if you just try to do the same thing everyone else does, you're not pushing the envelope. The other thing is that great ideas also need to be coupled with excellent execution. So initially, it might be the idea, but 95% of it is going to be the execution and the path to getting to that vision. So it's a combination of both of those things. But I always find myself seeing that the smartest people sometimes with the best backgrounds end up not being able to shoot for the stars
Yep.
because they're held back by what society says is, hey, don't go out of this box.
Sure. One of the most intelligent ways of making decisions that I've ever learned actually came from the U.S. Army War College. And it was interesting because when you're in the military and you're forced to make a decision, you have millions of lives that are at risk. And so you just can't sit there and go, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. Instead, when they make decisions, they say, okay, what is every reason why it will work? And let's be really thought out, put that out there. Now let's make a counter argument. What is every reason why it won't work? Back it by as much data and statistics as you can find so you remove emotions from the equation and guesswork from the equation, and you have it all there. When you do your job well enough, in other words, when you're as thorough as possible in your discovery, what you'll find is that the difference between a good decision and a bad decision actually is very, very small because the pros and the cons are very, very strong. You may offer somebody a sales strategy or marketing strategy. And right off the bat, somebody might come back to you and be like, I hate it. That doesn't work. Why? Because I never buy that way. Instead of taking a step back and asking, well, why did you say that? What is the data that you've seen that might support that decision? What other data supports that decision? Then couple that with why it might not work, and you'll come to a totally different conclusion. But you and I are here where we are today at the successes that we've achieved in this moment because of the quality of the decisions that we've made. Yet most people do not take the time to really ensure that the decisions they make are really well thought out and of high quality.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times you have to look at what is a chance that it could work. And sometimes, and maybe VCs are a little bit more on the extreme side, that they would rather have a 1% chance of something succeeding and going really big and a 99% of chance of it failing. But at the same time, there's also a pragmatic approach to being able to say, before I completely discount this idea, let me actually go and see, will the pros outweigh the cons significantly? And is there ways to mitigate the risk that comes with the cons? And a famous example of this is when Gmail was first released, everyone was thinking, how is Gmail going to make this possible? I think it was Larry Page, Sergey Brin at the time. They said, I actually wanted us to give everyone 2 gigabytes of free storage. And everyone in the room goes, you're insane. There is no way we can make that cost work out. There's going to be so many people that abuse the system. And they said, well, if we believe the cost of storage is going to go down, and we know that the majority of users are not going to abuse the platform, are there ways that we can lay down all the pros and cons? And are there ways we can mitigate the cons without completely wiping out the pros? And so they figured out different strategies to prevent spam and prevent abuse of the platform. The net benefit is that you're going to be the best solution, the most affordable solution, and something that everyone uses. Today, billions of people use Gmail for that very reason, that decision that was made in that war room. So we like to take those principles and saying, how big can we blow something up and think about it, even if it feels like it can't work? How can we work back into it? And so there was a time when investors would tell us transcription is too expensive. You need to go sell to like enterprises and charge them a crazy ton of money. And I was like, hey, we're going to have our base price starting at $10 per month. And so we actually made it work. And that's why we have millions of people using Fireflies today. Similarly, we went back to the drawing board and recently we launched our mobile app. So you can record in person meetings, not just your video conferencing calls.
Yeah.
And one of the things we thought about was, hey, what can we do that really incentivizes people? And we said, we're just going to give the transcription away for free to all users that have the mobile app and are recording on the mobile app. And no other product on the market is doing that. But we were able to, again, first principles, think through the pros and cons, and realize if we want to provide the most amount of value with the least amount of friction and know that these customers will eventually pay for the other important parts of the service, this is the right bet to make. And yeah, as I go through a lot of these decision making framework, where can I push the envelope? And then where can I get as much of the benefits of the pros as possible while mitigating as much of the risk? Because it's not always black or white, there's a lot of gray, right? And it's not the same as like in the military, we have a little bit of leeway. If we make mistakes, we can revert and we can iterate. But that sort of thinking is so important and so helpful.
Absolutely. One of the most important questions that I've asked myself is not what are all the reasons why this will become a massive success? It's actually quite the opposite. It's what are all the reasons that would stop, prevent, or otherwise slow me down from making this happen? And it's interesting because as entrepreneurs and CEOs and leaders, we can get really excited about our ideas. My chief of staff, I come to him about a dozen ideas every single day. And I'm like, oh, we got to do this. Oh, we got to do this and so forth, because we're not short of ideas and opportunities. When you take a moment to take a step back and go, what are all the reasons that would stop, prevent, or otherwise slow me down from it being successful? What you're able to do is identify all the different constraints. And from those constraints, be able to develop a strategy that will help you overcome those constraints. And when you remove the constraints, your path to success is extraordinarily smooth. I wish I could tell you that this is something that I developed completely on my own with my own IP, but it was actually, again, hearing and witnessing stories of billionaires who are doing massive, massive, massive things. They plan by saying, this is an idea. Let's sit down and figure out why this won't work.
Another thing we found is that usually different people in the team are going to be providing valuable inputs. But sometimes if leadership comes in and says, hey, this is exactly what we're going to be doing, then others that might have had a different idea will just conform around it. So instead, something that we found proving to be valuable is anyone, whether you're a junior person in the team or a mid-level person in the team, should contribute. And I try to hold my feedback till the very end so that I don't like hamper their spirit or their enthusiasm. And that way, all their ideas come out and everyone is welcome to share objections, things, whether it's something I present and like, why will this not work? Or when they present, we think about, okay, how can we consider this? So I think the diversity of ideas also helps, at least in the brainstorming stage. Eventually, you have to agree to disagree and pick something and go all in on it and heads down and execute. And if that doesn't work, iterate to the next thing. It's better to see something to failure fully than having 5 different channels open and poking and prodding at 5 different things. We found that to be a really important thing. But yeah, like this is very much in line with kind of our core philosophy on how we continue to stay relevant, how we continue to ship new products and features every week. Is we start with a strong conviction, we back it up with data, and once we figured out what we want to do, all in, go hard and execute.
So when you talk about execution, right? Execution, ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is really what matters. So, what are the disciplines, the rules, the strategy behind the best execution?
I think that small teams can get a lot done, and you don't need to have a large number of people throwing at a problem. Have really high competent people, could be as small as a team of 2 to 4 people, to go and work on a problem, solve it to the greatest extent possible, and they'll get it to the 90%. That's when you get other folks on the team to help and scale the initiative up. So I always believe in this sort of strategy of having different pods, different teams going after different problems, and really decentralizing it in a way, or giving each node its own autonomy to make those decisions. That proves to be really effective. We also try to keep the company small so that it is manageable intentionally, because once it starts growing bigger, the ability to execute gets diluted. There is a clear correlation, in my opinion, between the size of the company, the amount of resources they have, and the efficiency of that company. We naturally tend to get more lazier when we get bigger and we have more resources to throw around. Otherwise, there would be no startups because the big companies would out execute everyone. And that is like the reality of why startups exist, is you can have small teams of 5, 10 people disrupt an entire industry. So execution comes down to how you organize, how you keep things small, cut out bureaucracy, making sure that in our culture, people management is not a leader's primary responsibility. The idea is that every person should be responsible for a deliverable outcome, not just a simple story or how many specs did I write, how many lines of code did I push out. And that changes also how we approach work. Like, we want to find meaning in the things that we do.
Yep.
And down from the IC up to leadership, you find meaning when you're actually a builder. And so I lean towards being a builder and making sure everyone on the team is a builder.
You said it's important to execute on small teams. Now, I believe I remember reading a story about Jeff Bezos that he believes that if you can feed the team with one large pizza, then that's the size of the team, the optimal size of a team to execute on a project. Did you ever hear that story before?
I have heard that story, and I think Elon had a similar story as well, where they said, "Hey, if you feel like this meeting is irrelevant to you, you can just walk up and leave."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I,
Super.
I have heard those stories, and we go to another extreme. We build meeting software, but we have very few meetings in our company, and we don't expect everyone to be randomly invited to a large meeting. It's not conducive, and there's better ways to communicate that information. We also try to have as few recurring meetings as possible, because we believe that a meeting should be there to discuss, debate, or make a decision, not to share information. That information should be already shared prior to that. And we're a global team across 20 countries, fully remote. And you need to be able to write, document, and share information asynchronously. If there's something that comes up, I tell my team, message that instantly out there, put it on. Don't wait till some meeting or some check in to share good news or bad news or an important decision that needs to be made. So if it's important, just tell me now. There's also a little pet peeve we have at Fireflies is, when you're messaging people, get to the point about what it is that you want to talk about. One of the things that really resonated with us about Fireflies was, if I have Fireflies capturing that meeting that I'm not able to attend, or a meeting that I want to share information from, I never want to have to repeat myself again a second time. And what we do today when we onboard new employees is, if they need to go through an onboarding session or they need to learn about like a piece of the product, we'll just say, hey, here's a Fireflies recap. Go to these sections. It should have all the information you want. You can read it, listen to it, review the transcript. And we've been able to automate hundreds, if not thousands of hours of onboarding time for our team by just having had all that knowledge available there.
I think one of the best things that you said is meetings are not meant to share information, only to debate and discuss. Internally, one of the best tools that we use is Boxer. You know, I don't know if you've used that inside of your company, but it's great. It's just, you can have asynchronistic conversations with team members, you can accomplish something in 90 seconds, and it's a great tool. So, Chris, I know we're pushing up against the clock, and I want to be respectful of your time. This is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would you say is your best tip for the CEOs and entrepreneurs listening who want to know, how do I take my business beyond seven figures?
Personal productivity is something that I believe the best performers have. And ideally, if you're a young founder or CEO, you probably have some way of operating every day, an operating cadence that works for you. One thing that's proven to be really helpful for me is not over booking my schedule with back to back meetings every single day, and instead having days where I have no meetings so that I can think. The most important thing you can do as an executive is have the space to think, make decisions, and rationalize stuff. And we get so caught up in the process of being busy and being in 100 different places that we forget that the most important asset is the ability to slow down and think. And one way you can also do that is, does every meeting actually have to be scheduled for 30-minute or 1 hour blocks? Can you have a 15-minute meeting? Can you do a group meeting with like 4 or 5 people? And can they share all their updates prior to that meeting? So these are some of the things that have proven to help me scale. And I think that it can really help people get more done in a given week.
Awesome. Love it, man. So people want to learn more about you and Fireflies. Where do we send them?
Yeah, so you can get started for free on Fireflies.ai, the website, and you can start using it. Chances are you may have already seen it in one of your meetings or gotten notes from the Fireflies meeting, which is great. And you can find out more about us also on LinkedIn. I'm starting to post some content. So Krish Ramineni on LinkedIn or Twitter, I'm accessible.
Awesome. So Krish Ramineni on LinkedIn, Fireflies.ai. Be sure to check them out. Also, for more tips, strategies, and information for taking your business beyond seven figures, remember to check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Gaudet with my new friend, Krish Ramineni, and I will see you in another episode.